Welcome to our I was going to say cyber careers and coffee. This is actually a very special panel we have here today. We are going to be addressing cybersecurity talent retention. It is a very critical topic. So we are getting, we are, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, how fun. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on. We're good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Jessie Bolton, founder and CEO of Bolt Resources, where we specialize in cyber talent development, recruitment, workforce development, all things cybersecurity professionals, that is. So before we get started, I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists. And also let everyone know that this is going to be not only our discussion amongst our panelists today, but also welcoming everyone who is, if you're on the hiring side, employer side, if you're in HR, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what's worked for you and what maybe you're challenged, you're struggling with. And we'll dive into some things and some interesting topics underneath everything. So, all right, go ahead. Marian, if you could please introduce yourself.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Hi, everybody. I'm Marian Merritt, and I'm the Deputy Director of NICE at NIST. And NICE is an agency within the U.S. Department of Commerce, and we just focus on the cybersecurity workforce. So we convene a large community that gets together. In fact, we have our annual conference coming up next week in Dallas. But more on our work in a little bit. Let me turn it over to our other guests.
Kamal, could you go ahead and introduce yourself, please,
Sure.
sir?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kamal Kurat. I'm the UpSec engineering leader at Halliburton. I've been in industry for about 27 years in technology, but shifted towards cybersecurity in the past few years. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Hopefully, we can engage and learn something from each other.
Thank you, sir. Josh.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Joshua Farrow, and I work as a security engineer at Ryan LLC. They're based in Dallas, and I've been in IT for about 11, 12 years, and then I've been in security for I think it's around 8 or 9.
Yes, Josh, you are here, thankfully, to represent the cybersecurity workforce on the individual contributor side. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more from you. So before we dive in, we often talk about the cyber talent gap. We often talk about how do you attract cybersecurity talent. And there's a skills gap. There's a whole lot of challenges we're facing all together in this industry. But with what I found alarming in all these multiple reports is we're at more than half, if not upper 80s, I've seen that of employers or cybersecurity professionals are looking to leave their current employer, and that's a dangerous number if you think about it. And so what I'd like to touch on and dive into is why are people leaving and why are people staying. So Marian, we've been working together on this cyber talent retention project in order to guide employers on what they can do differently to modernize the talent, their processes in finding talent or retaining them. So could you first introduce yourself and what NICE at NIST does as it relates to industry?
So as I mentioned, we convene the community of the employers from industry and government, but also the academic world. And we get together in monthly meetings and workshops, webinars, annual conferences, because we're really just focused on what are the barriers, what are the key issues that everyone is contending with, whether they are students seeking to find the right education and training, or the employers who are seeking talent, or in the case of this conversation, employers and the workforce trying to understand what it is that is causing people to put a foot out into the, out the door. So what we need data, all of us need to understand what is the playing field like. And one of the projects that we fund, seek.org. And if you're not familiar with it, it shows the supply and demand for cybersecurity talent at every level across the United States, and it breaks that data down by city and state, by industry sector, by public sector, private sector. And so just as an example, we're currently tracking over 448,000 open positions in the United States. That means an employer put a job post on Indeed, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, one of these job sites, and they're looking for talent. And so Lightcast and CompTIA, they put that data together so that we can understand what kind of language are employers using for the talent they're seeking, and so forth. Other things that we work on is we have something that's called the NICE Workforce Framework for Cybersecurity. And what that framework does is it codifies a standard language to describe cybersecurity work. And the reason that's really important is, especially as we talk about the reasons people stay and the reasons people leave, we need to talk about of what are the hub, therefore we need, what knowledge do they need? And the cybersecurity framework speak the same language. So whether you're writing a job description or you're putting together a career pathway, you can start to see how if everyone uses similar language to describe work, we can better match talent to the opportunity. So I'll put a pin in it for you. Yes.
Thank you.
How are you using it in your work?
Yes. Good question. Kamal, have you, it's an interesting topic because there was a recent report by SANS, and it was interesting because many employers, HR leaders, are not familiar with the NICE workforce framework, a high percentage. So are you, and have you used it?
Yes, I currently use it, and I have used the NIST framework in the past to attain several certifications in ISO and SOC 2. SOC 2 has its own framework, but NIST is quite useful as a standard.
So let me just clarify. There is the NICE cybersecurity work, which is how one, and that's definitely the standard throughout the industry. But when we're speaking about the workforce framework, that is knowledge and skills required to perform tasks in cybersecurity. And there are 52 different work roles that have been defined in 7 different categories of work. So for example, a category is like oversee and govern, protect and defend. And the categories and the work roles are always being revised to reflect the actual work that people do. But Jessie, when you say, for example, you quote the SANS research that there's a low percentage of people with familiarity, I'm not surprised to hear that. We are still in marketing mode. So whereas the cybersecurity framework, the workforce framework, is standard in the federal government and standard for federal contractors, we're still making inroads to make sure that every employer is aware of it.
And it's really not, y'all have done a good job, I think, that modernizing it or updating it. So it's pretty easy to use, and we're not going to talk about it the whole time, but I would encourage everyone to, I'm going to put a link in the chat here in a little bit to visit it. It's very, very helpful for job descriptions. And I think that's a different topic, but definitely we'll put that link in the chat. I wanted to kind of dive into the cyber retention challenges. Working in the Modernizing Talent Management working group, we talk about these issues on a regular basis, but to bring to surface what's really going on the hiring side or challenges, I'm going to start here, and then I welcome anyone who has questions, any of our attendees. Please feel free to talk about any challenges that you're facing. But Kamal, can you talk about just from a leadership standpoint what you're seeing? Are you having challenges?
There's always challenges in recruiting top talent, but cybersecurity is a fast-growing industry, obviously, and it's very hard to staff at the current moment. But also, from a retention standpoint, it's quite a complicated question because there's a lot of reasons why some of the numbers you shared earlier about people wanting to leave their current work. I find this attributed to several contributors. One is many companies not all of them, but quite a few, don't make the right level of investment in cybersecurity until something bad happens, and then it's an afterthought, and then they get the motivation, right? I want to encourage companies and decision makers to really take a different approach, right? Make the investment upfront. You'll be glad that you did, right? The world we live in now, with wars and nationally sponsored cybercrime, and the reality of what we have to contend with in our industry, it's a different world than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So you can't use whatever models or data or budgets that you had in the past to counter the risks of today.
Let's dive into that. What we're in the past, right? I think what's happening, or what's been going on, we're kind of stuck in these traditional ways, and we're here to empower employers, right? All leaders of the organization, because what's going on is we're thinking things are okay. We are reading the data. And I say we, being on the hiring side. It seems that there is a disconnect between the employer or the hiring manager and the actual individual contributor. And Josh, I want to get your input on what those might be, because it's not just, hey, pay, we will increase salary, but isn't it's a little bit more than that. It's what are you hearing amongst your peers? And
so one of the big things that I've seen is, especially as it relates to this workforce framework, a lot of employers don't understand that there are different job roles within the security field. And so I tell this to friends that will try to go for like security administrator jobs or system administrator jobs. And a lot of times I'll tell them, like, you might want to avoid those, because companies that post those positions, it becomes a junk drawer of a position. It's everything. You're going to wear every hat. And there's this idea that hiring one cybersecurity person, it fits the bill and they can do all the stuff, when really they're the ones that are in the weeds. They're also the ones that are required to do some sort of compliance management, and also can you make sure our network's secure. There's so much that gets thrown into that, and I don't think that has been intentional all the time. I do know that there are cases where employers will find a job title because they know that the salary is going to be a certain range, so they will pick that. I've dealt with that personally, but I do think that the idea of the past mentality is an issue where employers just don't know that cybersecurity may have grown to where it's at, and that it's gone past just hiring a cybersecurity administrator and calling it good, but rather that a team is almost certainly necessary in some capacity. One of the best things I've ever heard is that for every $1 billion that a company is worth, they should have at least one cybersecurity professional. And I don't know if that's lower or not, but that was something that was told to me by a previous CISO that I worked with. And so you'll see larger companies that will be severely understaffed, and there seems to be an idea that well, if I just pay you more for your, you might be the leader of a 3-man team or 3-person team. If I just pay you more, then it'll fix the issues, when it's really saying, well, no, we need better skills. We need to be trained. We need a few more people, because the workload is just so heavy. So it's easy to come at it with saying, like, well, they just don't want to pay. But I do think that there's an element of not realizing that the cybersecurity industry and environment and horizon has absolutely changed from what it was, even 10 years ago.
Do you think, and I'd love to hear your input, Marian and Kamal, but Josh, do you think that is it a matter of just hiring more people, or what would you suggest it would be the next step?
I think that it comes down to what I've noticed happen, and this happened in my career, is there's a lot of people that get placed into the position of cybersecurity because the the requirement came up, and they may have been a network administrator or a system administrator, so they were the most capable person, and there wasn't any training besides, hey, we have to be NIST 853 certified, so here's this book, or we have to abide by RMF framework, so here's this thing, and there's class we're going to inundate you with, and there's not, and that very much happened in my career, and you have someone that's all of a sudden transitioning over to it's all IT, but it's really not. And so I think what happens is no one is put under somebody who has done it and has built out a team. And at the place I work now at Ryan, that is something that I have had the pleasure of being under, is someone that said, this is how a team needs to be built. So to answer the question, I think what ends up having to happen, it isn't necessarily a matter of you need 10, 20 people on your team, but rather we need to assemble a team that needs, and we need to identify what is it that is needed, right? Do you need incident response at this moment? Do you need compliance management? Do you need just engineering? What is it? Because, you know, a security analyst is not the same as a cybersecurity support technician necessarily. Right. And so I think a lot of times it needs to be purposeful, even calling in a consultant and saying, here's where we're at, what do we need, and how do we build out a path forward? We may only be able to hire 3 people. How do we get to where we need to go?
Yes, you are on point there. Kamal, yes, Marian, go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think those are great insights about being mindful. Just one thing I want to mention. I think you also need to look at where people are on their career paths, and make sure that you don't have just people at mid-career, because what we're talking about here is a situation that will not be fixed overnight. So if people are going to have high turnover, then you need to be looking at people and planning, okay, if that person leaves, what's my plan? And who am I training up for this? And who's my what next position am I entering? You know, we need to create more opportunities for people to enter the field and people to coach them while they're together. Or a organization. So thinking.
I agree. And I think that it's a mix of, there's all these, I'm sure those who are listening and just amongst ourselves, where there's so many smaller, more micro issues that play into this as well. And I'm constantly navigating through the employer side and advocating for the workforce. But to look at both sides real quick, you know, we're talking about a lot of small businesses, mid-sized businesses, enterprise, global companies. They seem to have it figured out a little bit more. But what about the individual contributor who is a 3-man team or only has a couple of folks, and they're just kind of burning the candle at both ends? There's not a mentor. Maybe there's not this, they're expected to kind of learn on their own, but they don't have that bandwidth. The CISO, he's also not available. Maybe their hiring manager isn't necessarily their go-to. Do they have a go-to? There's just a lot there. And in cybersecurity altogether is a thankless job. Much of us already know that. So if for the HR leader, but also the hiring manager that's listening, what do they do? I mean, where do they start if they understand, okay, yes, this is obviously a problem? Kamal?
So I really liked what Josh had to share, and I've seen it firsthand. It's a part of like a greater picture. I think the bigger picture is you need someone at leadership level in the organization to develop an understanding of what their cybersecurity program needs to look like. And that needs to encompass staffing, it needs to encompass technology, it needs to encompass what standards and policies they need to adopt, what their technical requirements are, and what their budgets will allow them to do, or what the budget limitations they may have. Let's say one of your technical requirements, for example, is you have to have a SOC to monitor your infrastructure and cybersecurity event, but you only have 3 people. Perhaps, implementing that in-house isn't the right choice at your current size. and partnering with an MSSP might be the right step to outsource that. But then there might be some things that you want to retain internally, right? So a cybersecurity program needs to look at the entire picture, and staffing being a critical part of it.
Okay, so I agree with that. But then what? So I also think, so if we think about what are the top reasons people are leaving, and just start there, what is the pivot for employers? Where do they start to do this? And for the small businesses that can't afford to hire as, their own team, maybe they have one person on site, but they're going to an MSSP. Well, then we probably need to, address MSSPs and how they're retaining talent. Can you speak to that a little bit? And I want to hear just Marian.
Well,
in.
let me just
Come on.
throw out some research. There are lots of organizations doing amazing research about the cybersecurity workforce simply because the need is so high and the issues are so shared, right?
Yeah.
To done, for example, most people are pretty satisfied in their careers in cyber. It's about 70% satisfaction, but there has been some dips of lately, and I think it touches on the issues that we've talked about. Some of it's simply that the pathways are unclear, and so people don't know where they go to next. I mean, these are the things that affect people's happiness. But overall, it does come down to the numbers of staff and the budgeting, and we've talked about this, right? So 67% say their organization is short-staffed. We're not surprised. A lot of people point to skills gaps, that people either are coming on board and they're not exactly possessing the skills that are required, or as the organization itself is evolving and the threats are evolving, maybe they're getting more into cloud security or they're working in artificial intelligence. So skills will continue to be a big topic of not only why people leave, but why people are just unhappy in their organization. They look around and there are big gaps and everyone else has to pick up the burden. There's also data out of ISACA. They did some research specifically on hiring and retention challenges, and they identified 5 things. For the people who said that they're dealing with a lot of the number one reason is that CISOs and organizations who say, yeah, that's what I look for, skills in my area, and then it's just a dollar deal. But also for retention of people, the financial incentives they're not aligned properly. So whether that's availability of funds to go to training courses, to go to a SANS course, or to get your certification renewed, is the organization sponsoring you? And not only that, are you given time away from the job, or is this something you have to do in your personal time? And that affects people's morale and their willingness to stick around. We've talked about limited promotion and development opportunities. If you are the siloed individual with a particular skill set and there's no place for you to go, then you have to leave, right? And then there's just stress coming back down to you don't get enough money, don't have enough people feel stressed, stretched. And that the other issue of the 5 was lack of managerial support.
And how does that align? And those are all good points. Very good points. But as I talk with the cyber workforce, the other side, they're wanting to leave for reasons that aren't lining up. So, Josh, is that accurate? Is it from what you're hearing?
Yeah, and that was something that led to me switching to where I did. In fact, I was security architect at my last employer, and I took a step back title-wise to security engineer, investing in this idea that this company, Ryan, would have, and talking with them, had a career path. And that was something I come to realize that the title I was given at my previous employer was from what I could tell, and in all reality, was based on the fact that calling me a manager would increase the salary requirements. And so the problem is I was still seen as a manager in all aspects of running a team, but not in other aspects. And so in that, another issue that started occurring was everything was an emergency. Projects were an emergency. There was no vision to what projects were supposed to be implemented when. And all of a sudden, it's like I'm working this direction, having my team focus on these different items, and then getting slammed from the side, being said, well, where were we at on this item we asked you about 7 months ago that got paused 3 months ago, right? And so, but I'm finding that happens. That's not unusual, right? That wasn't something that was just weird for my last job. It's something that's occurring everywhere. No one seems to want to line up priorities because everything's a massive issue at the same time, without realizing that, we're keeping the lights on. We're also having to do investigations that come up because I don't know if anyone knows this, but hackers don't care how many projects you have on your plate. You are constantly trying to balance training and the morale of your people at the same time, and also trying to deal with interdepartmental or intradepartmental relationships and attitudes and quirks. And so, I mean, Jessie, I worked with Jessie with just some career coaching, and she got to listen to me just kind of vent about that. And I think that I'm finding that is becoming the norm for a lot of cybersecurity workers. And I honestly don't think that management sets out to just make everyone's day bad. I don't want it to come across like my managers just it was kind of an effect of the system in general, but it wasn't like I was the only one having that issue in my workplace. It was everyone's backs were breaking. And so I think it's a change that needs to occur, right? From the idea of the workplace in general. Management
is what I'm hearing. So then we turn so we're going to thank you, Josh, for sharing that, because to me, that's a raw response to what's going on, and it's actually real because I'm hearing it, not just from Josh. And that's why I want to have these discussions, because they're not comfortable, but we need to all get uncomfortable with and start brainstorming and kind of coming up with new ways to do things a little bit better. It's a call to us as leaders, right, and managers and hiring authorities. So, Kamal, what do you think?
I'd like to make a comment about that. Yeah, thanks. So I think in those situations where, look, it really, a lot of this depends on the size of the organization as well. If you have a small company like a startup, and the number of resources on the cybersecurity is limited, say 2 or 3 people team, they probably won't hire a manager for that team. They probably roll them under IT, and now they're being managed by a set of leadership that really doesn't understand cybersecurity very well. It's very hard to set them up for success that way. So that could be like a really big reason there. I don't know, Josh, maybe you can verify that for me. So it's really important to figure out that part. But then also the other issue that Josh raised is like, everything is an emergency. It's very interesting how that's a phenomenon in cybersecurity, because let's say, you're a product engineering team. You have project management, right? You have sprints, you have a backlog, you have features that need to be developed. Yes, everybody wants you to develop all the features in the first release, but we all know that's not going to happen. So your work gets coordinated for you, and you work on it over time to achieve, whatever outcome you need for your customer. Cybersecurity is treated a little bit differently because, oh, look, this is a security issue, it has to be fixed right now. But if you put that kind of lens on it, everything has to be fixed right now. So you're constantly fighting fires. Nobody structures the outcome of cybersecurity in terms of projects over time. So I think it's really good to kind of like take note of that and look at cybersecurity in terms of risk, acceptance, and prioritization, right? What needs to be done today? What can wait till next month? And what can wait until later this year, right? This is a really good way to avoid burnout, because if that isn't done explicitly, you're going to have a lot of people feeling like Josh does, being overwhelmed by amount of things they have to do as an emergency all the time. That's just not sustainable.
And I do have one thing I would like to add to that we, if that's all right, we noticed, when you're dealing with shareholders at times, a lot of times you'll have your board, right? And so they're not usually dummies to this stuff. What we started noticing would happen is you would have people go to conferences, hear something, come to the next meeting, and say, we really need to get something like that. And then that would shuffle to the top. And really, we need to have leadership needs to protect the IT folks from that in saying that, yes, this is like that might be a valid point. This is what we have on the table on the agenda at this moment. We are going to take that into consideration. We hear what you're saying. And I get that that's a fine balance. I've never had to talk to a board. I've never had to do that. So I don't know the pressures that takes. And I can only imagine. But it does help whenever you have your people saying, hey, can you stick up for us? Like say, like, is this a priority or is that a priority? And are we going off of the flavor of the day? Because we know that this is all an issue. But what do you want us to get accomplished this month, the next 6 months, the next year, the next 5 years? And so it requires that strategic, operational, and tactical strategy that's being developed and vision that's being developed.
Well, I want to just remind the audience, if you do have any questions or feedback, please share with us. If we are completely off, let us know, whether you're on the hiring side or, an individual contributor. I'm loving what I'm hearing, but I also want to, there is a comment in the chat right now. I want to go ahead and introduce this topic from Dr. Abdullah. Does outsourcing cybersecurity services to specialized firms, so be that a SOC or incident response, pen testing, et cetera, does it make companies invest less in the workforce because they don't want to pay twice for the same task? If yes, this would most likely make the demand for cybersecurity workforce shrink drastically inside companies. And similarly, MSSPs wouldn't be able to hire so many because they will squeeze the existing to serve more customers, right? What's the solution? It is a great comment. I hear it, but yeah, ultimately, what is the solution or suggestion?
Can I throw my 2 pennies in for this one?
Do it, please.
Only because I've done it a few times. Okay, so great question, Dr. Abdullah. I don't look at this in terms of like cost and saving money. I think usually when you want to consider outsourcing your SOC or your incident response function, it is the goal behind it is typically, how do I get to a good level of cybersecurity practices and resources and technology very quickly with as little investment as possible. So if you were to build a SIEM and configure all your environments to send you all this data and train staff and have 24/7 by 365 coverage, that takes a lot of time to implement. So if you have the time to do that and you're not in a hurry to get there, and maybe a 1 year's runway is about fair for a small size company, that's the right path. But if you have a more imperative reason why you want to do this sooner, outsourcing makes more sense, because you can get onboarded into a service of that nature in a matter of weeks or months, and then you have coverage for your environment a lot quicker. Now, the cost really is something to think about, because typically those MSSPs, they have to buy that technology, they have to staff the same people you're eventually going to hire, and they have to put a premium on top of that as well, right? Last point I want to make is, typically companies that are going through growth, they would go the MSSP route, okay, so that they can get from zero to, hey, I have security or some kind of security, cybersecurity posture that is adequate for my business, while they build these internal resources. And then as they grow as a business and things start to make sense for them to insource those services, then that's kind of more transitional for them.
Well done. I could not have answered that question, so thank you. Do you have anything else to add, Kamal?
Unless there's a follow-up from Dr. Abdullah, I hope my question was...
So I want to ask the audience what strategies have worked, and are they, is talent retention a problem at all? Because we're seeing the data reports, and I'm hearing one thing, of course, just being on the recruiting and talent search side. But if you're HR, if you're a hiring manager, what issues are you seeing and strategies in place. So we may
And if
not get, go on. Yes.
I was
Marian.
just going to jump in here from the HR leader.
Yeah.
Our HR folks in the cybersecurity mortars know that SANS and SHRM partnered up. So SANS, everyone knows for the cybersecurity training, but SHRM is the Society of Human Resource Managers, and it's a massive organization of HR leaders. And if you are an HR leader, you need to get your continuing education credits each year. And there is training available on hiring your cybersecurity workforce, not only to understand the challenges, all the things we're talking about here, the strategies like Kamal was talking about, do I outsource? Do I staff up? And also, what are the different kinds of work roles? Because we want to make sure our HR leaders understand that there is a wide spectrum of types of jobs in cybersecurity. So that training exists in the SHRM catalog, and I just want to make sure I mentioned it so that people know to go look for it.
That is it's a game changer, though. I mean, that is a big deal. I think there's not enough room. I've talked to a few HR leaders who aren't familiar with the resources readily available, and it just seems like such a big, problem to solve. And so I do know of some that are turning to ChatGPT to write their job descriptions, and they're doing whatever they can with what they know how. But what you just mentioned, I think that could be a game changer for sure. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Yes, he appreciated your answer, Kamal. And okay, so talking more prescriptive about cyber talent retention, and again, if you're listening, please feel free to add your input. I would love to hear it, and we can discuss. But what would be the solution to the person that does want to leave? If we're already kind of parched, if our teams are parched, what, Kamal, have you been able to implement in your own teams, in your own day-to-day? I know you're leading, and I've heard a couple of things that you've done. I'd like to, if you could share with the panel and our audience,
Love to.
what has worked. Because and I'm just going to say real quick too, I always extend my questions because my brain is, very ADHD. But from what I know of Kamal, you're a very empathetic, highly emotionally intelligent leader, which I'm trying not to put my 2 cents in everything, but I tell you, that is a game changer in retaining talent across the board. So
yeah. Thank you for that compliment. Just appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, look, if you're in a leadership position, hopefully you've developed those gifts. But to answer the question, like, I think if you're someone who's ready to leave, hopefully you haven't let it get that far, okay? There are a lot of things that can be done. I'm gonna speak a little bit anecdotally here. What I'm about to share with you comes from my direct interactions with my teams, not in just current role, but previous roles as well. And after you have a lot of like these one-on-one conversations with the team, and you try to kind of like explore what their passions are, where they want to go in their career, what's really important for them, you start to develop like a really good understanding in general ways. And these are like the top things that come to mind from those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
People love certainty. Okay, there's just no getting around that. Okay, and then if you're in an organization that hasn't figured out how to put together a job description for the right role, and there's a diversity of roles in cybersecurity, as Josh indicated, and we can talk about that some more. But if that's where you're starting, you're not there yet. Okay, people need to know what their career path looks like. Okay, and sometimes they're pretty selective about what they want to do, and sometimes they're really not certain. So you have to have an explorative conversation with them, offer them some options, give them opportunities to try different things. Okay, there's so many roles on the team. For example, some of it is like AppSec, some of it is like specific AppSec, which is like hands-on pen testing for applications. Some of it has to do with governance and compliance. Some of it has to do with SOC and troubleshooting and finding root cause analysis and remediating things. Some of it has to do with patch management. And they're all very, very unique roles, and they're specialized in different ways. Yes, they have some foundation in common, but they're more specialized the more time you spend doing those roles. And so some teams might benefit from having their roles rotated from time to time if they want to participate in that. Give them exposure to things. You don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you're shocked how much they love doing something they've never done before. It's just that they never had the opportunity. So open the door to people, let them try different things, help them understand what it is they're excited about. There are some people who will have no problem operating on a SOC, watching the monitor, looking for events, troubleshooting things, triaging, finding root cause, looking at forensic data. You have some engineers who about 2 weeks of that is more than enough, and now they want to go do something different. So find out really where their passions lie, what they enjoy doing, and how they want to develop themselves in that direction. Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Are there any assessments? Because I think there's a lack of tools as well, or resources that hiring managers or HR may be unaware of. Are there any ways that you would go about learning beside, or maybe it's just a simple ask, right?
Yeah, yeah. I really don't want to talk about those tools a whole lot because I don't think I have as much experience with them as the other set of tools that I do
True.
want to talk
Yep.
about. Engineers are also very excited about the technologies they get to use. Okay,
Yes.
so if you're in a position of making procurement decisions on what technologies you want to use for specific cybersecurity tasks, it's very important that you evaluate those things and you get the teams involved in any kind of like a proof of concept or evaluation of technology. Engineers want to use latest and greatest tool.
Yes.
Okay, now you can't always shift if you've made an investment, but as you're making those investments, as you're upgrading technologies, as you're looking for the next best thing, make sure that the team is involved in evaluating these technologies. Very important because that's really what they use all day to do their jobs very well. And again, that ties back into the whole budgeting question. As a healthy cybersecurity organization has to have a healthy budget. And
Yeah.
for the contributors on the call, and if you're thinking, hey, Kamal, look, well, I'm interviewing with all these companies. Which one should I go work for? There's a few things you can do during the interview process. You might be able to ask the hiring manager a straight questions like, what was your budget for cybersecurity last year? They may share that, or they might withhold that. But there are ways to get this information in more creative ways. You can say something like, did you get full funding for your cybersecurity program for the last 3 years? Has it grown by 10 or 15 or 20% year over year? Uh, how are you growing your team this year? Am I the only new hire? What are the gaps on the team that you're hoping to fill, right? What do those job descriptions look like? Or do you expect this one cybersecurity person to do it all, right? Because there are some unrealistic expectations out there. I don't mean to be critical, but I'll just point one out for the sake of the exercise. Let's say the company takes a strategic decision to say, oh, I want to be a multi-cloud organization. I have software, I want to put it on Amazon, I want to put it on Azure, I want to put it all over the place. And then you want to have one person who's going to secure all these clouds. Yes, they are both clouds. They have some services that do similar things, but the nuances between them can be quite extreme sometimes. You have to be really specialized in this cloud and really specialized in this cloud. And I think to have one person know the security of both clouds extremely well is a misplaced kind of like goal, right? So it's very important as the business makes decisions about technical directions they want to take, how it has impact on cybersecurity, right? If you wanna go down the path of supporting both clouds, make sure that you have enough budget to hire people who can support both clouds at the cybersecurity level.
Excellent insight. And that's exactly what I wanted, because I think that there's some managers or employers out there that just aren't sure how to go about things, and maybe they think they're doing it fine and it's working for now, but different perspectives. We all learn from each other. So thank you, Kamal, for sharing. I do want to share a comment or a couple from David. He says there are a variety of reasons for the retention issues: company culture, leadership, remote opportunities versus hybrid, on-site salary, and so contract work versus career growth path and job security. So absolutely, these are all critical issues that we're facing. But that's my input. Some security leaders who I have spoken to allow cross-training within other teams to keep their internal talent interested. So yes, interesting. Yeah, those are good points, David. Thank you for sharing.
And if I may, you mentioned company culture. Well, there's company culture, and then there's the team culture. And team culture is a special group, and maybe you're looking around and there's only 20 for the work, less than that, around diverse ethnicities. So how do you make people feel when they join your team? I mean, this is just basic management principles, but you want to look at things that, for example, the Women in Cybersecurity or WESIS group did some research on exclusion, feelings of exclusion as a reason that people leave an organization, and they may like the manager, but nobody eats lunch with them. Or, for women, if all the team outings are whiskey and golf, whether you're a woman or you're not a woman, that may not be your thing. So it's sometimes these small issues that make people just not feel like they are truly 100% part of the team, welcome, and that leads to feelings of exclusion and yet another reason to leave the organization. Now, they're not going to say in their HR exit interview, oh, it's because nobody invited me to lunch, right?
Absolutely.
They're going to just say, nobody seemed to be interested in me or my voice. I didn't feel like I
If
was.
they say anything.
Yeah.
So, excellent points, Marian, because this is the underneath. If we peel back layers, and where we really need a focus is humanizing humans. And I talk about it. I like saying it because it's just so freaking true. We have to remember that we're all human, and a lot of us in cybersecurity or IT aren't extroverted, or maybe we don't drink. Maybe we're not interested in another happy hour. So how do you, from a leadership point of view, a hiring point of view, how do you include everyone and help women, or help, the neurodivergent professional, the individual contributor that is just not all about that life, feel more connected and appreciated or seen?
Who's that question for?
Everyone. If you, Kamal, you're welcome. Josh, please, anyone.
I mean, I know I don't manage a team now. I did manage the team at the previous one. One of my things that I'm sure my guys got tired and sick and tired of hearing constantly was, I want to know if I'm messing up, and I want to know feedback. But this is an open discussion. I mean that wholeheartedly, and I made it very clear. Your employment is not based upon your feedback of me, right? And that has to be clear, that because people that care people that don't care don't give feedback, if that makes sense. People that care and want things to change because they want to stay, that is a warning shot at times, to say, look, something's wrong. It's the temperature in this room is a little off, and I really enjoy this place, but things need to be changed. And whenever people, criticism is not easy, but I think having and establishing that line of feedback, and also requiring it from a top down between you and your employees, but also requiring it between employees is necessary. Management's not easy. And that was my first foray into that. And it's a lot, I think a lot of people will get into management thinking that they will continue to be able to do a lot of the in the weeds type of activity. And it's not, right? It's a good manager realizes that they are there to not babysit, and that is not a good place to be healthy. A good health place to be manager wise. It is to ensure that the environment that you are culturing and leading is healthy, mentally, physically, if you want to include spiritually, I don't care, but it is a healthy environment. I think that is the thing there. Healthy people, and I always told my team this, I want you healthy before you're productive. Healthy people are productive every single time. If you love where you go, you like to wake up and come to work, you will always be productive because you believe in the mission of what you're doing. And so when you feel included and you feel like you get to say, hey, I know that we went and got cigars last time. Totally cool with that. Totally fine with that. Can we go to somewhere else this time? And everyone say, cool, sounds good. Can we go play board games? Can we go and just have a cookout, right? Even if it's not a team outing, right? Just can we? That's someone saying, I I appreciate what y'all do, and that's cool, and I'm there for it. It's not my thing, but I want to still be included. Can we try my thing? And I think that that's necessary, absolutely. And you know, not. I'm very encouraging. Specifically, I've had some people reach out to me that were, I've had someone in our company that's a woman that reached out and asked for advice on getting into cybersecurity. And one thing I told her is I said, I'm really glad to know that you're trying to do this. There's not a lot in this industry. There needs to be more women in this industry. There needs to be more minorities in this industry, because it doesn't need to be just dominated in the way that it is currently. And there's a lot of people with good skills that I don't care if you're male or female, or what the skin color is. You need to be in this industry. We need your help. So, I mean, and so, and I also don't care what your orientation is. Like, I just need some help.
Yeah,
so, like,
right. And you just nailed everything. That all needed to be said. I'm so glad that, and this is why I invited you, because you say the hard things and you do it well. Thank you, Josh. And I'm sure you're saying what people are thinking. And Kamal, yes, wrap it up. We have about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I want to add a quick note here real fast. So this is really good. Look, I find food, or good food for that matter, to be the best unifier. Okay, you go for good food, and there's enough types of food to please everyone. You can't go wrong. But on a more serious note, I think, look, if you're an individual contributor, if you're new to the industry, you have to remind yourself that there's a reason you joined that company. Okay, and I really liked what Marian said earlier. There's a company culture and there's a team culture. Okay, there's a reason you joined that company. You must have liked something about it. But once you're on the inside and you don't like the team culture, or you don't like the company culture, you don't think it's healthy. When you're early in your career, the easiest thing to do is like find a greener pasture on the other side. And very often you'll be disappointed, because from the outside everything looks green, right? And you might change jobs and you go to the next place, and after 3 months it feels a lot like the previous place. Now, once you've done this iteration, like I have done earlier in my career, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, because it's time to give back, you come to the realization that it's more important to be an agent of change. If there's something you don't like about your team culture that's just not working out, have discussions with your manager. I find a lot of managers get promoted because they were great technical contributors, and they've done such a great technical work that their reward is to be promoted to manager, but nobody really trained them to be how an effective manager, right? And so giving them feedback is really helpful to them. You're developing them through that experience and helping them understand that, look, hey, the culture isn't great. Sometimes you might shock them a little bit because they're not spending time focusing on that because there's so many other technical distractions. And help them understand that what changes they can make as a leader to foster and cultivate that kind of culture that would be, what is more conducive to the team. Now, if it's a company culture, then that's why companies have those surveys. That's why you have leadership meetings. That's why sometimes you can do skip levels. You have a skip level with a senior leader. Let them know that, hey, look, I work in this other company and they had a really good program for this, and they had better training, or whatever qualities you want to bring to the new place. Advocate for them, right? Be an agent of change. Improve your environment for yourself and people who maybe don't have the courage to speak up. If you don't do that, you're just going to be moving from one place to another and feeling disappointed all along. So take a step forward, take a step up, be sincere about your views and your feelings on things, and state the issue and help people advocate on your behalf. Okay? Bring them on board. Let them see it from your standpoint.
Those are excellent points. I just want to add to those a little bit, just on both sides. I think there's a disconnect, and also we need to realize that a younger generation is really starting to take over in the upper 50s and 60s, 60% in cybersecurity alone. And so with that, there's some soft skills that aren't quite there, and it's I'm not trying to insult anyone, but there is a lack of assertiveness, and there is a lot of uncertainty in their day to day. But then you put cyber into it, and some of them, and I've heard it straight from those folks, is my manager, they really don't care. and there's some other issues, underlying issues, and it's almost like, choose your own battles. I'm already dealing with a lot. I'm not going to touch that. And the quiet ones often are the ones that are thinking of leaving, because their manager isn't asking, how are you? Just a simple, how are you? Or those performance reviews, they make fun of them, the individual contributors on the, they're just going to say what you want to hear. The manager wants to hear, and move on, unless, and this is the other side, unless the hiring manager takes the initiative. If there's not leadership training, if they don't know how to lead, or maybe they're in the management position because they were technical and they didn't really want to lead people anyway, but they're just kind of pushed into it. At some point, it's a call to management and upper leadership to say, hey, I need to kind of get uncomfortable and empower my team, open the door, ask the questions, and maybe shift their
So
style.
I want to harken back to something I brought up earlier, which is really thinking about how we are developing early career talent. You're not going to keep this generation for 10 years in your organization. I mean, it would be unlikely. And if it happens, it's because you had a career progression path that met their needs and interests, and those change.
Right.
So more likely you're going to, and there are about $1,000 in like 6 months for somebody to be truly independently productive. So your goal as a manager, as an organization, is to keep them well beyond that initial training period. So one of the things that works really well is for people to feel that management is investing in them. And that comes not just in the form of dollars, but time. Mentoring is very important. So it can be challenging in a smaller organization, and it doesn't always have to be a formal mentoring program, but you want to make sure that people have regular check-ins with somebody, not necessarily directly on their colleague team.
Right. I would even say peer-to-peer. Yeah.
And if your organization can support it, think about developing those employee resource groups based around whatever need, issue, membership your team members may belong to. So that could be a women's group, a veterans group, but really you're just giving your employees other avenues for developing their skills. And it could be those soft skills by having, regular opportunities for people to practice presentation skills. It's on the line. So
thank you, Marian. We are wrapping up. I think there's a lot we did not cover in 1 hour. This was more of an open discussion. Of course, thank you, Marian, Kamal, and Josh, for sharing your input. I would love to have a follow-up, and we will, but for any feedback, if you are attending, please feel free to share in the chat or email. You can connect with all of us on LinkedIn. And then I'm going to put in the chat here the workforce, the NICE workforce framework, or if you wanted to visit it. And then we're also inviting HR leaders and hiring managers, as well as individual contributors, to share their insights via survey, 3 to 5 minutes. It won't take long, we promise, because we are going to be creating a guide that is more prescriptive for the hiring managers and employers to retain talent. And so we would love your input one way or the other, because the only way we're going to make things happen in our favor and secure our organizations is by working together and opening up and sharing our resources. So thank you all. If there's any last minute questions, I don't see any. All right. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for your feedback. All right. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone, and stay tuned because we're going to take a deeper dive, or I know I will. I'll be sending out some stuff. Thank y'all. Have a good